Good morning, everybody. I can see, I think Councillor Chandler's joined us. Good to see you there, Ian, and thank you for your earlier note just saying that you were trying to get here, but really great that you were able to join us online. Thank you for that. And before we start the meeting proper, we just have the Vice Chair to be determined because Councillor Keir has been unable to join us today for today's meeting. So, Hazel, will I pass over to you?
Yeah. Could we please have nominations for a Vice Chair just for today's meeting?
Could I please ask for Councillor Strong to be in that position, please, Hazel? Thank you.
Do we have any other nominations? No. Could I ask for a seconder for Councillor Strong?
I'd like to second.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Hazel, and thank you, Councillor Strong, for stepping in at short notice to the Vice Chair's role. And welcome everybody to our Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee. Hello, Councillor Wright. I notice you've joined us. I hope you can hear us clearly where you are too. And welcome to anybody who is watching online, either currently or at a future stage. It's great to have you with us as well. Our committee is very much focused on reports that are brought to the committee either because they need to come here or because we've requested them to come here, and we believe are important for the development of the best council that we can be. And with that in mind, our work is very much about asking questions in order to try and get to understand what may be concerns or what may need further explanation in order to try and see whether or not we can help make our services as good as they need to be for the best council that Monmouthshire can be. So that's how we see our role in the committee. And we've got some very interesting reports in front of us today. First of all, if I may, are there any apologies for absence, Hazel?
Apologies from Councillor Keir, Chair.
Thank you. Noted. And are there any declarations of interest? I don't see any. So we'll move on to Public Open Forum. Hazel, I'm not aware of any notification of Public Open Forum issues. So we'll move on to the first report, which is item number 4, and that is the Public Protection 21-22 Performance Report to review the performance of the service area. Before opening this up and welcoming officers who I'll ask just to introduce themselves to the committee and to any residents watching, I would like to start by, on behalf of the committee, recognising what an extraordinary period that this was, 21-22, and to sincerely thank every single person in the services for their commitment in that period. We were just reflecting in the last half hour that we're now in January 2023, and we look back with some greater knowledge, perhaps some greater wisdom, perhaps not as much as we'd like. But in the middle of 21-22, we were absolutely at the height of the pandemic, and there were a great many of us who were working online more than working out and about, but that was not the case for just about everybody in these services. And I just want to pay tribute to that very excellent commitment, which we really are very grateful to the services for, and I'd appreciate it if on behalf of the committee, because I know the whole committee shared this view when we talked about it earlier, if you could please pass that back to all your colleagues. We really appreciate that you went out and about whilst a lot of other people were online and actually dealing with fear. You went out and you went into schools, you went into care homes, you went into businesses, and you helped to organise them to be safe and secure, and to carry on with the work that you needed to do, and you kind of rode through what for an awful lot of people were real barriers to their activities. So thank you on behalf of the committee, and please pass that through to your colleagues. It's very sincerely meant. So we'll move into the report proper, and if I may, could I ask officers to introduce themselves introduce the report on the basis that the committee members will have read the report, but be grateful for you to summarise, highlight points, and we will then move into questions. But perhaps you could introduce yourselves first of all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks for your opening statements. We'll certainly pass those thanks on to the teams, and it has been quite a challenging time, so we'll certainly pass that on. We appreciate the thanks of the committee. My name is David Jones. I'm Head of Public Protection.
Hello, Hugh Owen, Principal EHO of a Public Health Team.
EHO being?
Environmental Health Officer.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good morning. It's Gareth Walters, Trading Standards and Animal Health Manager.
Jennifer Walton, Superintendent Registrar for Monmouthshire.
Thank you. And over to you, Dave.
Right, thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members. This is something we do annually, so it is a summary of what we've been up to. Quite a high level of activity, which is obviously in the report. I'll just cover the covering report as per Chair's comments. I'm not going to go through the 20 pages that's attached, but I'll just try and pick out a couple of pertinent points. As I say, as per Section 3 of the covering report, it's something we've been doing now for 7-8 years. It is hopefully well received, and it does give a reflection of that wide range of services that's so crucial to the members of the public we serve. It's not just actually the public, we also serve businesses, as per Appendix 1 that covers the detail: food hygiene visits, health and safety at work, consumer protection, other aspects of the work, licensing, taxi drivers, etc. 3.2, as the Chair indicated in his introduction, we've been particularly involved, obviously, with the pandemic. So the financial year 21-22 was very much the second full year of the pandemic, and we did manage to maintain those services as best we could. Clearly, I gave an example there. If you're a tenant in a property that's suffering from various conditions, then clearly we need to go to those regardless of the Welsh Government alert level. So we did continue those services and remain very busy. 3.2 goes on to explain some of the other aspects. Clearly we do an awful lot of reactive work, and there was a noticeable increase. You might think perhaps potentially with businesses being closed, etc., you'd have an actual decrease in service requests, as we call them, demands for service from the section. A lot of them actually went up in volume, e.g. noise complaints actually increased. The second bullet point on the second page talks about those COVID cases, and I think it wasn't just actually responding to those business issues and schools asking us what they need to do in terms of social distancing, screening, etc. We actually, as a service, provided that service of dealing with the COVID cases, the track and trace service, which is quite different to colleagues in England that did it through a call centre arrangement. We actually did that service. Welsh Government funded. We had up to 80 staff on that, so obviously we had to contract extra people in. It's a small team, we couldn't have accommodated that. But that was all about avoiding the spread of COVID within communities to stop that pressure within NHS hospitals, particularly was the aim of that service. So there's an indication there of demand increasing during that time. Similarly, training standards and licensing had an uplift in some of those complaints that they typically deal with. Organised events, they came back online, so we had an awful lot of time spent with different alert levels. You can't have mass gatherings, etc. I've given a couple of examples there, but we do have an event advisory group that covers those aspects in terms of what they could and couldn't do as part of year 2 of the pandemic. We do have a number of external governing bodies, Food Standards Agency, Drinking Water Inspectorate, Welsh Government, you name it. We've got a lot of people overseeing some of that work. And that's picked up in that point there. We obviously, through the pandemic, which obviously the proactive work did slip away somewhat, we kept those governing bodies advised of those changes because of the urgency of dealing with the public health crisis at that time. So we obviously kept everyone fully advised over that 2-year period as to what our service would be looking like, what would need to be slip away somewhat, e.g. food safety visits. They did open and shut as per the alert levels from Welsh Government. So we did keep people advised, SLT, etc., of progress. Next point is, we will continue with annual reports. They do, as the chairs indicated, provide a useful purpose, and we want to engage members clearly and take your comments on board and open for scrutiny. We would typically be a lot closer to the end of the year, so if we can bring that to June or July this year, that would cover the 22-23 year. Another aspect in terms of we are particularly busy, the summary position is we've got just over 30 full-time equivalents, providing an awful lot of services which are indicated in the main report. We are very conscious that if there are any new statutory duties that come our way, we do need to secure funding for that. It's not an endless capacity issue that we can accommodate everything. An example would be potential licence scheme for holiday lets. If that does fall to public protection, we'd need some sort of scheme to pay for that. We can't forever put other things on an already busy team. We did put a budget pressure mandate. This is the other purpose of evidencing what we do. Clearly that helps in terms of the budget process, and we were successful this time last year in securing extra funding for April 2022, which was helpful. We do obviously link into the corporate plan in terms of health and well-being and other aspects. So I think that's probably my sort of quick summary, if you like, Chair. Just to say, I think we are particularly busy teams that provide a number of vital services, and obviously here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and also to Gareth, Hugh and Jennifer. You may find questions directed at yourselves, so I'll leave you, Dave, to decide who handles the questions. And I think quite a lot of the questions that we may have relate to whether there are embedded behaviours coming out of the period of 21-22 that we're focused on, and whether there are activities that we're catching up on. So we'll probably probe a bit of that. I notice, Councillor Bond, you have your hand raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, David, and everyone. And I think you should be congratulated on the significant work you have done with all the pressures, and it's evidence in the report that you've done lots of hard work whilst running the track and trace and all the responses, especially as I picked up the being flexible and adaptable as the needs and the businesses have diversified, and with events restarting, as you just said. I noticed that you had sorry, excuse me. I noticed that you'd but two of your members had been. Well, I've got a few questions, so shall I say all of them first, and then you respond?
Why don't we hear your questions, and then Dave can decide how to deal with it.
That's what I was asking. Yeah, thank you. So first of all, I didn't completely understand what TTP was, but now I know it's track and trace and protect. I don't know whether you want to put that in there somewhere so the public can understand as well. Thank you. And you had two people off on secondment. I wonder whether they're coming back or whether they're, as Councillor Neil just said, we might be having another peak in March, so whether they'll be seconded back out. I don't know what your thoughts are about that. I noticed that fly tipping has gone up, and was this to do with do you think closed sites, or what do you think the actions might be coming from that, what the learning is, and what the indications are to date for this year or this period, and also pest control was up, and is that due to reduced human movement, or I have no idea obviously, but please can you let us know what the learning is from that. Dear me, I don't know why I've suddenly started coughing. And there was an increase in trading standards complaints and advice, and I think you've just alluded to that, was that linked to the shutdowns and startups of the businesses. Public Spaces Protection Order for dog controls consultation, I wonder what that was and whether you could just give us 2 minutes on that. And the last one is about the environmental checks and monitoring. So you monitored for nitrogen dioxide, I think, or NOx, and you said the 4 main towns. I wonder which main towns those are of the towns in Monmouthshire, and are they based on population? And wonder whether there was any other monitoring such as particulate, because that's obviously important for asthma and other things that possible causes. Thank you. Sorry, that was a lot.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. But I'm sure Dave's noted those, and there are some really important areas there which sometimes are overlooked, such as air quality in terms of the effects of COVID. So thank you for those questions. So Dave, could I pass over to you to see how you wish to deal with them?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. That's really helpful questions. So I'll start, and I think there were 4 there for Hugh, my colleague to my right. So I'll pick up, take your points about track and trace, which we get into terminology. The P stands for protect, track, trace and protect. But yeah, take your points. Being a public report, we'll certainly put that in. Secondments, we do encourage it if it is a benefit to the services. So we currently got one of our licensing officers at Welsh Government dealing specifically with taxi policy and licensing, so that would be a real benefit when he returns. But so we do encourage, if it's got a service benefit back to Monmouthshire, then clearly we'd encourage that. The final one for me, I think, was TTP and a potential peak. I should have explained, obviously, we're looking at last year. That service has now been transferred since last summer. Monmouthshire TTP was disbanded as a service. So that is now all held regionally at Caerphilly. So that's through a service level agreement with Caerphilly. So they cover that service. It's reduced because they're not covering all people that get COVID that's reported through. They're just dealing with care homes specifically. We still have an interest in terms of dealing with schools that have numerous queries. What happens if Billy's appeared and he seems to have symptoms? We would liaise with that local school to do that. But in terms of a potential peak, that is now for Caerphilly to manage. I am on a regional group in terms of how we manage that as best we can. So there's some flexibility at Caerphilly now that covers the whole of Gwent region, or Arran Bevan footprint. So it sits with Caerphilly to manage that. But just in terms of governance of that, I am involved with to ensure that service does continue, and we support it through our environmental health colleagues as well, be it a care home or a local school, for example. So hopefully that answers that. I'll hand over to Hugh now, if that's okay, because 4 of the questions were, just to remind Hugh, fly tipping, pest control, PSPOs, and environmental checks, air quality. Thanks. Then Gareth.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks, Councillor Bond, for the questions. First of all, the flight tipping issue. Yes, we can see that in 21-22, the total number of incidents have increased. I think that's due somewhat to more accurate recording of the statistics of the incidents as they occur to some extent. But yes, I think we can't ignore there's a substantial increase which is correlated, I think, no doubt, with a lot more work being done at home. We certainly noticed during the COVID periods, people took the opportunity to do a lot more building work at home and use their time wisely. And we did see a consequent increase in the number of incidents. It's something that we take very seriously. In the last couple of years, Welsh Government have given local authority powers to deal with, to issue fixed penalty notices where people do not exercise the duty of care to make sure that they dispose of their waste properly. And that's something that we're going to be targeting as best we can throughout this year. So quite simply, if somebody's got waste to get rid of, and they get that knock on the door from a man with a van saying, well, can we get rid of it for you? They must ask, are you a registered carrier of waste, and get their details. Because if they don't, and if that flight tip material ends up tipped up on the mountainside, and we get evidence as to who's responsible, that householder could be issued with a fixed penalty notice. So that's the flight tip. And pest control, yeah, a marginal increase, I would suggest. I should emphasise that the service that environmental health provides is one of enforcement on pest control. So until around about 2013-14, the council provided a pest control service. That was removed because it was a discretionary it was a discretionary service, I should say, and it was removed in 13-14 in the times of austerity, as it was in the vast majority of local authorities throughout England and Wales. So environmental health, we provide an enforcement service, which is quite simply if a resident contacts us and says, well, my neighbour's garden's full of refuse and there are rats running around, yeah, we'll visit for those neighbouring properties, get the accumulations dealt with and make sure that appropriate baiting is carried out. Again, it's something that the reason why we keep the statistics is because we want to see, well, is there a significant impact over the years in the removal of that pest control service from the council. So there is an incremental increase, certainly in the last 3, 4, 5 years, and something we need to keep a close eye on. Public space protection orders for dog controls. This is something that certainly has absorbed a lot of my time in the last 6 months or so, and is going to absorb a lot more in the 6 months to come. Quite simply, the rules in Monmouthshire at the moment is that you must pick up after your dog if it fouls certain areas in the county, and that's it. And there's been certainly some pressure and political pressure over the last couple of years to explore what dog controls we want in the county and to expand on them. Certainly, yes.
That consultation, and wonder where that was at and whether we can help on town and county councils.
Yes, fantastic. We did a big public consultation in October, from July to October 2020. We had close on 1,500 responses to that consultation. And that fed into our report to Strong Community Select in March 2022 with certain recommendations. And that was to engage with the main stakeholders to consider dog controls further. So round about November, early December, we did write to all town and community councils, together with all the major landowners, including obviously the estate section, the grounds maintenance section for the council, Brecon Beacons National Park, the major housing associations, to ask, well, what dog controls do you want in your area? So, for example, Abergavenny Town Council will be considering Bailey Park. Should that be a dogs on leads area? Should it be an exemption area? What about dog fouling? I'm certainly hoping that there'll be a mandate that if a dog fouls any public area in the county, then it must pick up after it. Dogs on leads, dogs exemption areas, they're more emotive, they're more local, down to local judgment. And so we're currently in the middle of that process, Councillor Bond, waiting for the feedback from town and community councils, from the major landowners as to what they want in those areas. We're scheduled to report, I believe, to the Places Committee early March. That's going to expand further on what the proposed dog controls are. So dog fouling certainly will be covered, and there's going to be certain recommendations there for dog exemption and dogs on leads areas. The process is that we need to produce a draft public spaces protection order. That needs to be approved by committee. Or amended as appropriate, and then we go out to public consultation, full public consultation on a draft PSPO. So consultation is key in the introduction of any public space protection order, because quite simply it criminalises whatever is included in that order. So it's a very important piece of legislation. I'm hoping towards the end of this year we will actually produce a PSPO with the appropriate controls.
I'm just conscious that your expertise in this area is profound, but we've actually got quite a lot of different issues I do want to make sure we cover, so I'd be grateful if we could move on to some of those other areas too. Thank you,
Chair. Finally, air quality. Well, it's as we expected, things have improved over 21 and 22 with less traffic on the roads, quite simply. 4 major towns that we do monitoring in: Abergavenny, Monmouth, Chepstow and Usk. We've got 2 air quality management areas, Usk and Chepstow. I'm very pleased to say that the air quality hasn't exceeded the objective levels for nitrogen dioxide in Usk for 5+ years. And certainly I think it's 2 years in Chepstow. We do particulate monitoring, and we've noticed that particulate levels are also dropping where we monitor in Chepstow as well in recent years. But it's going to be interesting how we move forward as the traffic levels pick back up.
Thank you very much. Really, really informative and comprehensive. I just wondered why Caldecott is not monitored as being the 3rd largest town in Monmouthshire.
Thank you. We do some diffusion tube monitoring, so we do some more localised monitoring in Caldecott. We've certainly been monitoring in recent years the nitrogen dioxide levels in the 21st century school, and we did find those were well below the objective level. In any monitoring that we do, we are guided by Welsh Government advice and guidance as to where we should monitor with regards to traffic levels and traffic numbers. So that together with our experience of the diffusion tube monitoring that we do from time to time in different locations does feed into where we actually need to concentrate and focus.
I'll follow that up separately then. Thank you very much. Thank you for all that information. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Hugh. And can I also welcome Councillor Griffiths to the meeting. I noticed you've joined us, Paul, and it's good of you to be able to do that. I know you've got an extremely busy diary today, so thank you. We're just, Dave, back to you and questions that you may want to further on.
I think Councillor Bond had one other question about training standards, complaints and advice levels. So can I hand over to Gareth, who's here? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Gareth.
Thank you. Yes, as you can see from the report, whilst it was a drop from the previous year for trading standards, as you understand, the year before was quite unique with the outbreak of COVID initially and a huge amount of referrals in as we went through the lockdowns and various control measures. But yes, you're right, Councillor Bond, with regards to the previous year, it is a further increase. And I think what we're starting to see is the cost of living crisis kicking in. It was early days last year, but it was certainly there, and we're certainly getting more inquiries about people that I think are more attentive to what they spend in, the value for money and this sort of thing. So it's creating a lot more inquiries. But I wouldn't say there's anything specific other than we've also had a large increase, not just in Monmouthshire but across Wales, with regards to vapes and that being taken off.
Thank you, Gareth. And Dave, were there any other points you wanted to raise?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so I can see Councillor Chandler, you had your hand up, and may well be you wanted to follow through with Gareth.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, team. And actually, thanks not just for the challenges and all the work done over COVID, but also for the quality of this report. Actually, I think it's really impressive to have such a detailed report with hard data, but also explanation with it. So very praiseworthy on that. And obviously, I think there's not much to fault in the year or in question. I suppose that a lot of my questions really come out in terms of what are the implications for now. And I suppose that's where I'm looking for. So strictly speaking, it's not in relation to the report. But I have a few things. I suppose one of my concerns from the report is understandably, you've built up a fair backlog of inspections, and I suppose I'm looking for reassurance or an indication of how you were able to catch up with the backlog of inspections. I'm thinking particularly food hygiene inspections. I think it is one that you particularly marked, but I'm also looking at areas like animal health inspections. You highlighted, for example, the inspections at high-risk premises. There's no formal programme due to other pressures. I thought high-risk premises would be where you would be looking for. Is that, and just as a clarification, does that include things like abattoirs? Do you inspect abattoirs as part of that, or is that a separate issue? So I have that. I suppose the other one that I'm particularly concerned, again, which is more current, is looking at homes, looking at environmental health, particularly in the light of the inquest into Awa Bishak, who obviously died from of the respiratory problems due to mould in Rochdale, and certainly England are looking at new guidelines on mould in houses. I just wondered whether you've looked at what the implications might be for some of our poorer quality housing in Monmouthshire and how you're going to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. Some important question areas. So, Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. Yeah, I think there's three there. I'll pick up the first one, backlog. Second one would be for Gareth. We haven't got any abattoirs in Monmouthshire, so we have got a significant livestock market, but, so we're not dealing with abattoirs directly. But Gareth can answer the animal health inspections elements. And then finally, I'll pass back to Hugh in terms of the Rochdale case and dampness in homes, if that's okay. So in terms of the first element, backlog of inspections, yes, you're right. In a typical year, we do 500 food hygiene visits. So that's dropped significantly as a consequence of the COVID response. So Welsh Government were conscious of that. The governing body, the Food Standards Agency, so I think your question is about recovery. So certainly in 22-23, and we're coming to the end of that, we expect to have picked up and recovered that position, to have inspected all the A, Bs and Cs at the end of March, so we are on schedule to do that. So yes, there's been that almost hiatus, isn't there, in terms of not completing all those inspections. It is important. You'll see the star ratings on the doors, and I think some of the standards have dropped as a consequence of being closed and change of hands, so we are in a recovery position through this financial year, so that position's certainly improving as we speak. But certainly we're very keen on getting back to a proactive regime, because that's a lot more helpful both to businesses and obviously the public, have that reassurance. If you're ever reacting, things tend to decline quite rapidly. So to answer your question, the recovery plan's in place for those routine proactive inspections. We're looking to be on track, which obviously we'll report back to committee 22-23. But if Jill Dickin was here, who's the principal for that side of the Environmental Health Service, she could provide members of that assurance that we should be back on track at the end of the year. Thanks. So the second element, I'll hand over to Gareth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Right. Yeah. With regards to trading standards, and animal health, the last few years we've had to become very much intelligence-led and reactive, purely from a resource perspective. It's encouraging and great to have been able to appoint 2 officers recently, both one experienced officer from a trading standards perspective and a new officer who's going to be learning from scratch, but also in the previous year, we were able to take away the temporary status of 2 of our animal health officers. So again, at the moment, we've got 3 animal health officers, which is great. And as a result, we are able to undertake more proactive inspections. From a statutory perspective, like food, there's the feed side of things. So that's the visits that have been focused on this year. With regards to animal health, you are correct. The critical control point inspections, as we refer to, they are undertaken, so they are markets. We've got one small abattoir at the back of the butchers in Raglan, which they forgot about. But again, historically, abattoirs aren't our remit as such. Our remit ends at the gate, effectively, once the welfare of the animals in transport have reached there. But I'm sure you'll be aware of the problems over the last few years with various abattoirs and welfare concerns about employees and etc. So with my strategic lead role for Trade and Standards Wales, I'm working closely with Animal Health in Welsh Government to look at how we can improve that. And certainly they've started with the larger abattoirs, so the larger plants are being looked at to see what measures can be put in place, better CCTV, etc. And then hopefully that will be rolled out to smaller ones, but we'll wait and see. I think that covers all the critical control points.
Dave.
Yeah, I should have explained. Yeah, if we did have, we have actually got Avatar Foods as well, haven't we, on the Heads of the Valleys, with turkey plant. So that's covered by the Meat Hygiene Service, so it's a sub-arm of the Food Standards Agency. Just to clarify that. So apologies, Gareth's right. We have got one small abattoir. So I'll hand over to Hugh now in terms of housing question. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Chandler. Yeah, a very pertinent point regarding damp and concerns regarding mold growth, as highlighted by the recent tragic case. The role of environmental health is that we do inspect, we respond to complaints regarding housing conditions in the private sector, and that includes tenants of our social landlords. And the three main hazards that we do typically come across are damp, excess cold and fire safety. Something that our officers have always been very concerned about and keep a close eye on, and require the landlords, whether or not they're private landlords or our social landlords, to carry out appropriate works. Interestingly, we haven't seen a substantial increase in the number of damp and mould growth complaints this year, which you might have expected with the pressure on our energy and fuel bills. So we haven't noticed that. Where we come across damp mold growth problems, particularly with our social landlords, we work very closely with them all. We've got a memorandum of understanding and working practices established, so we can highlight the cases at the earliest opportunity and require appropriate works to be done where that's needed.
Thank you, Hugh. And moving on to Councillor Pavia.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to follow up on Councillor Chandler's question, because that was something I was going to home in on. And you talk about in 521 there about in the second paragraph about enforcement action. Can you unpick that a little bit more, please? Can we unpack that and to try to understand where our level of enforcement is? Because I know we had recently the plan and performance report come to this committee, and we could see that the element of around enforcement wasn't where it needed to be. I think obviously those officers recognise that and are going to do something about that. But it'd be good, because we talk about enforcement there in the report, but there's no figures, so it would be good just to understand that. I mean, the last sentence there in that paragraph, in terms of the adults and children that are being protected, is that in relation to the numbers in that first sentence there, about 69 adults and 30 children that were exposed to significant hazards? The other question I have is on air quality, and it's something obviously and the air quality management zone in Chepstow in my ward, I do play a really sort of active observatory position in looking at this and attending the air quality meetings. It obviously frustrates me that while we do a huge amount of monitoring, I mean, I don't know where I assume we share that with that information with Welsh Government, because we don't seem to be doing anything with partners to mitigate the air quality issues in Chepstow, which, as I said, really frustrates me. I think Hugh rightly said that it'd be interesting to see the traffic flows and the evidence that has emerged over the last year. I think traffic has gone back to where it was prior to the pandemic quite easily. And while we may not get back to some of those particulates, those levels that we saw in sort of 2017-18 with more electric cars on the road, that traffic pressure is there. So it'd be good to understand how you share that with Welsh Government, and that they're fully appraised of some of the issues that are going on in Chepstow. And finally, just in relation to the budget, and again, just to follow on Councillor Chandler's point about pressures, I think one of the issues with across all public sector really was the standing down of public services was relatively straightforward, but standing those services back up to a meaningful level and dealing with a backlog and trying to get back on a strategic footing has been challenging right across the public sector. So in terms of those budgetary pressures and understanding the backlogs, do you feel that you've got, I haven't looked at the obviously all the budget mandates yet, and that scrutiny process is going to happen in the next couple of weeks, but it'd be good to understand that if you put in an additional mandate for more resource given the backlog that is clearly there in the report. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pavitt. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, I think the first two questions would be directed to Hugh, housing enforcement and air quality, and I'll pick up the budget one at the end, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pavia. Housing enforcement, first of all. As I explained earlier, environmental health, we are responsible for looking at the private rented sector and responding to complaints. What we certainly try and do in the first instance is work with the landlords. It's far quicker and to get the appropriate works done where we've got a compliant landlord. So we'll inspect a property where a complaint is made, and then we'll approach the landlord. We discuss the works which are necessary, and in a vast majority of cases, I should say, the landlords we find are cooperative and they get the works done in the appropriate period of time. That then avoids us having to go through the quite lengthy process of serving notices and, if necessary, threatening and taking enforcement action where those notices are not complied with. Enforcement options available to us essentially are to serve an improvement notice, which is a legal document which says that certain works have got to be done within X period of time, or ultimately a prohibition order. We don't want to serve prohibition orders on our private rented properties if necessary. We all know that there's certainly a stress on the availability of the private in the private rented sector and properties available for rent. So thankfully, again, we do tend to find that the approach that we make to the landlord tends to be very successful, getting them to do the works at an early stage. I think that's very much down to the expertise and specialists of our officers in that engagement with the landlords. One point regarding the numbers of adults and children. Yeah, if I turned around and said, well, in last year we did 37 or 40 inspections, what does that mean to anybody? So a number of years ago we decided we need to start recording the number of adults and children that we find in those properties, and the number of adults and children that we actually protect by getting the landlord to do appropriate works. So I hope that answers the question regarding housing enforcement. Yes.
Please, Gareth.
Thanks. I just wanted to add as well, we're trying to support our colleagues in environmental health because under the Energy Efficiency Private Rented Property England and Wales regulations, Trading Standards got an involvement at looking at the minimum standards, and all rented property in the private sector now should be at least at an energy efficiency rating of E or above, and that's soon to be made higher. So we are trying to identify all the properties that aren't complying in Monmouthshire, because again, they might not necessarily be the properties that are of immediate concern, but could cause concerns in future. So again, hopefully that work will support views.
That's really helpful, actually, Gareth. In particular, the standards going to be raised and will be very interesting for residents as well. Say any more on that?
Just I concur with Gareth's point, and we are always working with the social providers and with other organisations such as Rent Smart Wales to try and improve standards and just not respond to complaints. And that's going to be a key, certainly, moving forward in the next year or so. From the air quality point of view, we've got 2 air quality management areas, as I mentioned earlier, one in Usk, one in Chepstow. We provide an air quality report to Welsh Government every year, which is approved by Welsh Government every year. With regards to the air quality management area in Chepstow, because that's very much linked to the Welsh Government trunk roads, we do have Welsh Government attendance to the 2 or 3 air quality steering group meetings that we have every year. So Welsh Government are aware of the problems. They do feed in to our steering group meetings. And Councillor Pavia, your attendance at those meetings, your ongoing attendance at those meetings is obviously very important to us as well. There are, without going into the detail, there are transport studies which are feeding into the next steps for improving air quality and the transport issues that we've got in the Chepstow area, and they are very much led by Welsh Government, working together with MCC Highway Section.
Thank you, Hugh. Dave, anything else on that?
Yeah, just to pick up the final point from Councillor Powers regarding the budgets. So obviously we're looking here retrospectively at 21-22 year. So 22-23 we did put investment in. So there's a new investment across those. There was £223,000, which was helpful. So obviously this time last year we presented the report. That was the evidence base for increasing the budget position for 22-23. There is a budget mandate now, but it's about a restructure, so there is a saving there. Councillors be fully aware of the position for 23-24 going forward, but that doesn't impact on the front line, so it's very much about protecting the front line. So we have had some investment, 2.4 additional EHOs, doesn't sound a lot, but it is a lot for small teams. An additional TSO in Garriswold, and we referred to that earlier, an extra half for licensing officers as well, so those services had some boost for 22-23, so that should reflect in not just the capacity, also the well-being of the team. It can be quite an onerous task in terms of the reactive service we provide, so that's really helpful, and we appreciate member support this time last year. We went through that budgetary cycle. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I do beg your pardon. I didn't put my microphone on there, so everyone else on the call will have missed that. My apologies. Question from Anne. Perhaps we could all visit Hardwick Hill, Chepstow, as we did a few years ago, to see the monitoring station, an explanation of its working, which is very helpful. Thank you, Anne. And from Paul, do we have numbers in relation to enforcement actions that have been made and those complied with and those that are still outstanding?
Thank you, Chair. both of those are for me. Yeah, certainly we can accommodate a visit to the Hardwick Hill air quality monitoring station for any members that would like to go. It is in the actual main report that our next report to committee may want to focus on a particular area of public protection. We did a number of years ago, perhaps 4 or 5 years ago, focus on air quality, and that's something that we can certainly focus again in our next report if there's a feel from members that they would like that. The second point regarding housing enforcement, yes, I don't have we do have the figures. I don't have them with me, Councillor Peria, but we can certainly provide them to help inform the report.
Hugh, could I ask if you would be good enough to send that information round to the committee members? It would be really helpful just to have a look at those numbers if we've got them, just to understand what the outstanding numbers might look like. Thank you. Thanks very much indeed. I'm going to move on to, we've got 2 more questions from the committee members, but I'll also just, as we get to the end of this, ask Councillor Griffiths if you had any additional comments as we get to the end of this particular report, Councillor Griffiths. But first of all, Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thanks for the report. Very informative. A sort of veritable A to Z of public protection services. If you'll forgive me to start with an anecdote leading into a question. My first weekend as a councillor last May, we had advance notification of what was being characterised as an illegal rave in Roggett. It all happens in Roggett. I took a wander around at about 11 o'clock at night to see what was happening. I was chatting to a resident in her garden when she received a phone call from one of the public protection team to say that he was on site, I think with police, and they were in the process of closing down what was actually a house party. I'd just like to acknowledge that excellent level of service, both in terms of dealing with the problem, but also of communicating with the public. But arising from that, I'd just like to ask, how do you organise things to ensure a good standard of out-of-hours coverage for that sort of event? And are you confident that given budget pressures, you'll still be able to provide that sort of level of service? So that's my first question. 2 more to follow, if I may. Firstly, the reference on page 10, services may struggle to take on any new statutory I forget what kind of statutory duties. Are you aware of any in the pipeline that are going to cause a particular problem? And then finally, there's a reference on page, I believe, 13, notifiable, or communicable diseases. Well, I think we should call them notifiable diseases. There seems to be an increase. Do you see that as an actual trend, or is that sort of well within sort of normal year-to-year variation? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strong.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I'll start with Hugh in terms of noise, but certainly we know it's our EHO that dealt with that, so we'll pass that on. That's really helpful. But Hugh can deal with the first aspect. Thanks.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Strong. I concur with what Dave says. I remember that case. Well, it wasn't actually myself. It was our Mike Richardson on site. Out of our service, the service that the council provides is officers can be contacted in the event of an emergency. So there may be a highways officer or an engineer, or not necessarily an EHO who's on standby. But then they've got a number of contact numbers that they can contact if they consider it to be emergency. Typically, senior management, so myself and Dave would be available. We're very much led by intelligence. We work very closely with the police, fire service, etc. So where we get intelligence that there may be something like a rave developing, we always tend to get some sort of indicator. If there is, we'll make sure that officers are available. So while our workload typically tends to be 9 to 5. You will find our officers doing a lot of proactive work where we get events that we feel may potentially give rise to problems. So certainly our officers can be out on a Saturday night, planned visits, and that sort of thing. I'll pick up Dave on the second point. Dave may want to add a little bit more about statutory, additional statutory responsibilities that may come our way, may cause additional pressures. I mentioned earlier the public space protection order. Certainly a big part of a conversation will be for that. Well, how do we enforce it? So if we increase the rules and regulations governing dog controls in the county, key to that is, well, it's going to create an expectation. How do we make sure that that expectation is met? So that's to be obviously sounded out in future committee meetings.
Thank you, Hugh. And Dave, just briefly, if you could, we've just got to crack on.
I'll keep it brief. In terms of additional responsibilities to the authority, one that springs to mind would be Public Health Act Wales 2017. So it doesn't sound too bad in a sentence, but that includes the toilet strategy that came before scrutiny last Thursday. So that takes quite a capacity in terms of officers. So we dealt with that. Minimum unit pricing was within that act. So the latest one is special procedures for tattooists. So the point was that special procedures at tattooists, we're going to have to recover that cost via the licensing regime, so they'll be expected to pay X amount for a 3-year license. So it's really, I would represent obviously the council with Welsh Government when they proposed new legislation, or national legislation for that matter, via Westminster. So we're always mindful as to how we would do that. But generally, we'd look to recover those costs if there's any additional burdens on an already busy service. The final one was communicable disease. So you are right, if you look at the figures in the table, it's gone back up to over 200, isn't it, in terms of that's the salmonellas and the Campylobacters. Potentially people have taken their eye off the ball a bit in terms of food safety, in terms of the COVID pandemic that occurred. So we'll keep an eye on that, but it's quite significant year on year, wasn't it, in terms of the increase. But we follow all those up, whatever they might be, cryptosporidium and all sorts of notifiable diseases that we deal with. So nothing really sticking out, but it could be more barbecues. You've got a hot summer, Campylobacter with undercooked chicken is quite common, so that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have to move us on. Thank you for that. And Councillor Bond, you've already asked quite a number of questions. It will need to be brief if you come back in.
Okay, so I had some questions around vapes and the learning from Grenfell, and also the dog breeding project. But something that was mentioned that no one else has put up, and we discussed it in the pre-meeting, is about learning. I know Councillor Pavia and Neil said about this. You've gone through so many changes and adapted to all these changes and delivered so well during this time. I wonder if there's any opportunity for doing a team-by-team learning review.
Councillor Bond, could I add to that? And thank you for raising that. I was waiting to bring that in myself later on, but thank you for bringing it up. Could I just actually make a specific suggestion, if committee member colleagues are supportive of this, that you will be bringing forward the 22-23 report at an earlier stage, and appreciate that that's going to take place. You've indicated, I think, May, June as a sort of timing that, or somewhere in that sort of time frame that you'd be looking to bring it forward. What I'd really like to see, and I think Councillor Bond's point is to this, is a review of lessons learned that are specific, that we could actually use to be better prepared for whatever might be coming down the track. It's not a theoretical or academic exercise, and nor is it to draw criticism. It's to be as objective as we possibly can be about what worked, what didn't work, and what lessons learned, what would we do differently. I'd really propose that forms part of your 22-23 report. And part of the reason for that is it's much better to try and identify and keep abreast of things as they're live, rather than trying to reflect on them many months later. So now might be a very good time to be thinking about building that into the report. I don't know whether committee members, at the pre-meet, sounded like we had consensus that would be a good thing to look for, and I'm not seeing any disagreements on that. So could I leave that with you, Dave, rather than something to respond to at this moment? Just a couple of additional points, and then I'll ask Councillor Griffiths if he's got any particular points to make. And again, thank you for attending the meeting. The latest UK Health Security Agency advice is of 2 new potential variants. I think this is going to be our lives for a long time to come, and it's beginning to look like increasingly the way we deal with influenza on an annual basis, whether or not it's more serious or not, is for experts other than myself to comment on. But the 2 new variants, CH1.1 and XBB 1.5, are the variants that are being pointed to as likely to cause a further wave that would reach its peak probably towards the end of March, according to those who are experts in this. And again, not myself, I'm just summarising what I've read. And the symptoms of those, it appears that they will be more highly transmissible, and that there will be symptoms that we're familiar with around continuous coughs and high temperatures. So it really is about that the lessons learned relate to. It's to help people understand just how behavioural changes, such as they might be, modifications such as they might be, rather than simply moving from the 100% lockdown approach that we were into 100%, no holds barred, where it almost appears that in some cases not too much has been learned that has changed any behaviours in significant terms in the UK. So it's really to say that it's for that purpose that I think that question is posed. It was very instructive, I thought, just reading the report, to read, and this might well be something, David, that in times to come will become part of a historical reference from Monmouthshire County Council. But in 5.3, dancing was not permitted. It just took me right back to, that was the world that we were in at that time. Dancing was not permitted. I did it in my own kitchen with my own wife, but nobody could stop me. Striking the old John Travolta moves and so on. But it was extraordinary to think of that's the time we were in. Just a question, if I may, to finish on that. The reference in 4.4 to 15,584 COVID cases in the period referenced. Is that the total number of cases in that time frame that we're aware of in Monmouthshire? Or is that some, but we know there were significantly more we haven't got an estimate for?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and absolutely your comments earlier about the variants, and obviously we're cited with UK HSA and public health colleagues, not just at PHW, but obviously in Narren Bevan will have their own public health team, so we meet regularly with them to see that response, and absolutely about lessons learned. How do we go from you can't have 50 to it's okay to go to a concert at 65,000? So it has absolutely totally agree with your comments there. So we are cited on that. We do obviously meet in terms of that response through Caerphilly, and potentially if it did become a real pressure point for the NHS, we may have to revert back to looking at community spread. So we're certainly cited on that, and I value the comments made on that. So certainly nothing that's gone away. Then in terms of the case number specifically, 15,554 on the report for last year would have been those reported. So that would have come through a CRM system. So I think you'll probably remember people had phones and that they would actually notify that they had COVID perhaps the employer asked for that. So then that would trigger a response from the TTP team to call them to say, you know, the scripted responses to where do you get it from, and, you know, avoid travelling cars together, etc.
So David, that related to TTP rather than because it's 16% of the population over that time frame or thereabouts. Seems very low in terms of numbers of people who've actually had COVID. So that was TTP rather than.
So it is a notifiable disease. That's why it's in the column. But I mean, I know self-employed builders, etc., that didn't want to have a phone call. I think that soon got around that you might be involved with a half-hour, 60-minute phone call potentially. So there's certainly more than, you're right, in terms of percentage terms, you would have had more. I think at its peak, like 25% would have been infected. So,
and over the course of that whole period, you'd imagine that would be moving to a much higher percent.
Yeah, absolutely.
David, thank you for that. We'll need to move on, but I do want to just say to Councillor Griffiths, if there was anything, and thank you again for joining. I know you've been extremely busy with your schedule today. Just if there was anything that you wanted to add to the comments already made, Councillor Griffiths.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just want to say how much better informed I am because of the dialogue in this committee this morning. I've taken a close interest in the issues that have been raised, and in my continuing dialogue with the responsible officers, who I thank for their contribution, I'll be picking up on all those issues that are raised and testing how our policies, for which I am responsible, should evolve in the lights of the discussions that have taken place. And in that context, I've noticed, Chair, your suggestion of how our annual reporting could itself evolve to build in a learning process from this experience into future practice. So I think it's a dialogue that I very much learned for. I thank everyone for it, and I will do what I can to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Griffiths. That's very helpful. It was partly this reference in 7.4, which we completely welcome, that reflects on, I'm just quoting from the report, the services enjoy an excellent reputation, which is very good to hear. But it's always a little bit concerning if we are reflecting ourselves upon ourselves as opposed to getting some genuine feedback other than anecdotal. Anecdotal is good, but if there is quantitative information, some of that's tough because when you're dealing with some of the complaints that you're dealing with, to ask those who've been complained against, how do you feel about the service, you might get, but I think it would be very helpful if there was a way that you could look at of feeding back the direct experience of our residents into the provision of the services. That would be really, really helpful. And Councillor Griffiths, you probably missed at the start, but we did begin the report by saying extremely sincere thank you to every single person in the services who went past the barriers that so many of us were shielding ourselves behind, and they went into the schools, they went into the care homes and into the places of work day in, day out, and that not only took an awful lot of commitment, I think it went beyond the normal call on anybody, and we just wanted to pass on extremely sincere thanks from everyone in the committee for every single member of the service. I just repeat that because I think you might just have missed that, Paul, just at the start of the meeting. But great, we thank you for the report. We've heard the report, and committee members, just to look to you to say we accept the report, and I'm looking for indications that we do. Thank you very much indeed, and for all the responses and for the questions too. We're going to move on now to the report on registration services, and I think we're still going to be sticking with David and with Jennifer, so that's great. Welcome, as it were, to the floor, Jennifer. Thank you, and as we do that, thank you, Hugh, and thank you, Gareth. Appreciate your time and all your hard work. So with the seamless movement of officers on the floor of the chamber, that's really good. Thank you very much. We'll move on in the same way, if we may, David, to the expectation that committee members will have had the chance to read the report, and it's very much now about looking at the key points that you may wish to bring out for the review of performance in this service area. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so a shorter report than obviously the extensive one for environmental train standards and licensing. So registration services are with public protection as well. So I'll just, in terms of intro, to say it's something we have brought to scrutiny before. I think it's helpful to have that internal governance to see where we're up to and where the performance is. I'll just say that we have got the General Register Office, or the governing body, that take an active interest and publish data, but perhaps I'll leave it there, and perhaps Jen can just perhaps highlight the performance for 21-22. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. And Jennifer, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, you have my report there, so I'd be very interested for any feedback, really, of anything that's of particular interest to the councillors or anything you'd like me to look at in future reports. It continues to be very, very busy within the service. I've tried to pull out some figures there in the table, which I thought you might wish to look at and reflect back on the previous year, which obviously encompassed the majority of the lockdowns, which is why those figures were particularly unusual. But things really still haven't, I would say, returned to normal, and it will be interesting over the next year to see what pattern of behaviours we see from the public and pattern of events that we see within Monmouthshire now. There have been several changes. So the Grange Hospital is opened, which is having a big impact on Monmouthshire. So it will be interesting to see over the next year or so sort of what trends are going to emerge out of the pandemic.
Indeed so, and what embedded behaviours and unwanted embedded problems coming out of it that we look at. So we'll open for questions. I'm just going to, as I'm looking for any questions from other members, I'll just ask a couple of my own, if I may. It appeared that I noticed today a report that the population of China has reduced and the birth rate is significantly reduced. I noticed Monmouthshire looks like the birth rate reduced in this period as well, unless I'm misreading it, by quite some significant extent. I don't know whether that is an aberration just in terms of reporting, or whether or not that is a reflection on a reduced birth rate that reflects Monmouthshire, and which may reflect Wales more widely, and indeed the United Kingdom more widely, and whether you have any comments on that, I'd be interested in. I would also just be looking to have some information on 5.1, whether you've any information about the developing partnership working, just potentially just an update on that. It sounds that may be a good thing, and to what extent that's been part of your thinking in the budget process. I was interested to, and I'll just put these 3 or 4 at the same time, it might be easier to deal with them. What kind of access do our residents have to registrations and records, and the extent to which that they feel that they can, sort of come along and review or have access to those? And just also to comment that it's good to see the customer feedback from residents. However, that it's anecdotally made, it is always good to see that feedback. And digital feedback that you, I think, are looking at will allow more quantitative information about just how our customers feel, our residents feel that these services are being provided, and whether we can improve. It's a great way of learning as to what people are looking for, let alone whether or not we're doing well or doing less well in certain areas. But I wonder if you might just look at those, please.
Yeah, I'll pass over to Jen, but I mean, yeah, there hasn't been a dramatic drop in births. It's because the Grange, so the Monmouthshire residents going to the Grange, which is in Torvine district. So there's that. Customer feedback, absolutely, and we'll incorporate that into the other reports as well. But in my experience, the feedback's fantastic in terms of dealing with people. You know, it can be a very low ebb, sudden death in the family, or the celebratory, the ceremonies have really gone through the roof because obviously the lockdowns affected hotels, so that was a huge backlog in terms of ceremonies. So the feedback's generally good, but yes, I think we can quantify that better with the digital response. So, but that's my overview. But I'll hand over to Jen in terms of the detail. Thank you.
Before you do on the birth rate, are you saying? I think you're saying, Dave, that it's not that it's come down, but if it's split now with the Grange, how do we know what it is? Whether it's come down or increased.
So, thank you, Dave. So, yes, as the Grange has opened, the maternity services in Neville Hall have been downgraded, so it's midwife-led only. So the majority of births now in the Aneurin Bevan area are taking place in Torvine, which is why we are registering for them. All of our figures are fed into the Office for National Statistics, so those are figures that can be pulled out. So the births for Monmouthshire residents can be pulled out from those overall figures, but I only have access to the figures for births that actually took place within Monmouthshire, so that's why it appears to be such a significant drop. Also, as a result of following on from COVID, there were times during this year that the maternity departments in Neville Hall had to be closed completely because of staff pressures, and all those staff were over at the Grange. So there was no opportunity for births to be taking place there at various points during this time. So that is why it seems like such a significant drop. So that's why it will be interesting to see now going forward. There will be another significant drop, but we're not sure where the final figures are going to stop really, and what we'll have, what will be taking place in Monmouthshire going forward. The partnership working, yes, we do intend that it will expand to include death registrations as well. So at the moment, the partnership working means that anyone who has a baby within the Aneurin Bevan Health Board area can register their baby at any register office within the Aneurin Bevan Health Board area, so within the old Gwent area. It's proven very, very popular and has helped us to manage the backlog coming out of lockdowns much more quickly than we would have been able to do any other way. And now we want to look at extending that forward. The ceremonies programme last summer was just so extensive for every district that it just wasn't possible for us to start to look and developing the service in this way. But we are hoping over the next few months that we can start to have some meetings and see how that would work, and hopefully create a plan for that going forward. But it certainly, we have the logistics in place to do it because we're already doing it for births. So hopefully we can get that underway once we've formulated that procedure. The next question then, the access of residents to our records. So any resident can put in a request, so whether it's family history or any historical certificate, any details they have, they can submit to us and we will search the records for them. We have an awful lot of records there that we keep in our strong room, which is temperature controlled. So it's something that we don't generally allow members of the public to come in and examine them themselves. We will carry on those searches for them, but yes, anyone can submit to us the details that they have, and we will do our best to track down any relevant events taking place within Monmouthshire. And the last question then, yes, we used to have, when it was purely paper-led and everything was face-to-face, we did have a lot more feedback from service users, but I think the digital feedback will make a difference, so we're hopeful. We've got, I know the digital team are really under pressure as well at the moment, so hopefully we can get that underway quite soon, because I know it is certainly under development. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And, you know, it'd be interesting just to see what happens nationally with the birth rate. I remember starting a new job in one council and a cabinet member asking me to make as one of my objectives for the year increasing the birth rate in the area, and I thought that really is never part of my employment contract, and you know, I had to have a very difficult discussion with that particular cabinet member. You know, councils never fail to surprise us, really, do they? But anyway, moving on quickly, Councillor Bond, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Again, applaud the change and the responsiveness and the coping during the COVID pandemic, and well done you for delivery of all the things you have delivered. I just wonder if there's a way, we were talking about performance and feedback, I wonder if there's a way of baselining or relating it to other areas and what their performance has been like, and whether there's any learning there, positive probably, but or learning as well, constructive. Also, I wondered, I noticed that the marriage registers are now obsolete. That was just an interesting, if you wouldn't mind telling me what happened there. And I saw that your team is 11 casual workers and then 7 others. So I'm a bit confused. Is that 18 or have I misread it? Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. That's if you've read it that way, so will many of us. So thanks for asking that question. And over to you, David.
Yeah, I think Jen's best placed to deal with that. But yeah, again, noted in terms of the COVID response, and we'll be thanking the staff again, I think, in terms of going over and above, and particularly weekend work. So, you know, clearly Saturday's a particular pressure point, so we do that. But Jen's better placed in terms of specifics. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Bond. So with the marriage registers, it has been a very long time coming. There's been over a very long period of time various discussions over trying to include mothers on marriage entries. It was a historical situation where fathers were included and mothers never were, and that was something that was needed to be addressed and dealt with. And after a very long period of development, the solution that was found was for the actual marriage registers to not be used anymore. So whereas in the past every registrar had a register and would take that to the wedding, would write the details in, and everybody would sign in that one document, we now have schedules. So it's an A4 piece of paper with all that information on, which is checked and signed by all the parties. But that's not the legal document. That is not the legal registration. So the legal registration is completed when we take that back to the office and we upload that then onto our national system. So we still have that schedule there, but excuse me. So although we have all the old registers, so all the completed registers, we're still storing those. Going forward now, it's all held on a database, on GRO's database. Okay, so sorry, the other question I think is probably my maths. Apologies for that. I think I've. Yeah, so there were 6 of us in the office, and 11 casuals, and I think that was just a problem of my maths. Apologies for that. So yeah, I've not added that correctly. Sorry.
Well spotted, Councillor Bond.
I will put that right.
You should write to the Prime Minister. You've already passed that maths qualification that I think he's seeking, that we all have. So thank you. I'm going to ask.
The one was about relative performance.
Yes, relative performance. Exactly.
Thank you for the answer.
Sorry, yes, so we do have, so the General Register Office publishes performance on a monthly basis of all districts across England and Wales, so we can see where we are ranking alongside everybody else, and we also have regular visits from our compliance officer who will look at those figures with us and raise any concerns that they may have, so we know where we are and we know what pressures and whether we're in similar positions to other districts across the country, which certainly seems to be the case at the moment.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Councillor Chandler.
Yeah, thanks. And actually, I'm not sure if you maybe already answered my question, but I'm going to answer it again anyway, just to check. I mean, obviously, you're dealing with people at very emotional stages in their life's journey, of birth, marriage, and death in particular. So it's, that those indicators are not just, include those efficiencies, but also include that quality of service. And I'm sure it's excellent because your staff are trained in that. I suppose I'm looking, one that stands out for me is the weddings. Pardon me. You were just talking about the changes in the system, and that you've also got a huge increase in the number of weddings as well, and civil partnerships. But you talk about the fact that because of the new system, people are not getting their marriage certificates as rapidly as you would like. And I suppose if you're getting married, though, that's one of those things that you want to have, and you want to be able to see it, and it's part of that whole emotional journey. And I just wondered what you're doing to be able to speed that up, either through technology or different processes or systems to try and make that part of things, part of that as a more satisfying experience.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler, and it's a very well put question, because these services are so connected to emotional points in people's lives, and for all sorts of reasons. Thank you for asking it. And David.
I'll hand over to Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. It's still very much a learning curve, really, with that. And when you see next year's report, you'll see that the ceremony programme this year has been, the numbers have gone up way again from there. So it is something I'm very conscious of, that I need to allow more time, and I need to put more resources to that, so that we are getting those certificates out to people more quickly. We had discussions, we have regular meetings with all the superintendent registrars across Wales, and we've all talked about whether we should produce something for the couple to have on the day, because it's such an emotional time, and lots of people like to walk away with something, and that may be something that we look at doing in the future. But certainly the recommendation from GRO was not to do that initially, because they didn't want the public to be confused about what the document they had was. They wanted to make sure that people understood they didn't have the certificate there and then, so they weren't producing this other document that they had, thinking that it was a legal document. But we could certainly look at doing, my ideal really is to be able to get all of the ceremonies registered and get the certificates out within a few days. So that's what I'm looking to try and do, and this year I'll be allocating more resources to getting that done at the beginning of each week, and making sure we stay much closer to the 7-day target, and really getting them out as fast as we can.
Thank you, Jennifer. And if I may just make a couple of questions. It's always good to see in a performance report areas for improvement, which are, regardless of how we might be measuring our overall performance in the time period, that you will have ideas within the service that you would like to be improving in. I'd encourage you to consider, please, the way in which you might be able to build that in. And that's something that I'd be asking more frequently of your other colleagues in other service areas. But improvement planning, just what specific areas, and they of course would depend upon budget, capacity, and various other things. But I think it will help to give all of us an understanding of those areas that we might want to do what we can to help you in those areas of improvement. I was interested too in the number of British citizens, new British citizens that moved up in that time period, I think from 19 to 31 within Monmouthshire. And I was looking at the actual test and wondering whether this is something that we as a service, we as a council, might want to make some input into on a national level. I don't know if colleagues are familiar with the test, but the test includes questions. This is for individuals from other countries who wish to become new British citizens. To just give you an example of a few of the questions. Which king was executed in 1649? Was it James I, Charles II, James VII, or Charles I? And I know all of you are thinking, well, it was Charles I, obviously, but I wonder just how many people across the country would really know that. Another example, these are actual questions from the British Citizen Test. Who built the Tower of London? Was it William the Conqueror, Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth I, Prince Harry, no, I made that bit up, Oliver Cromwell? And again, just asking how many British citizens would know the answer, which apparently is William the Conqueror, but another, who made the first coins to be minted in Britain? Was it Stone Age, Anglo-Saxons, Iron Age, or Romans? And it did strike me, who on earth created this test? And you know, a lot of other questions following from that. There's one question that I could see on Wales, which is how many members does the Welsh Government have? And to be honest with you, I very much doubt that many people in Wales would know how many members the Welsh Government has. It's 60, but how many would know that? I just wonder whether we should play our part in Monmouthshire to say, look, for goodness sake, are we asking people the right and the reasonable questions to be able to become British citizens and actually play part of life today rather than be historical experts? And would it be reasonable to be asking them questions that I'm making a guess here rather than anything else, I very much doubt the vast majority of existing British citizens would know the answer to. Councillor Strong. Yeah, I'd just like to strongly agree with that. I'll point out I got all the answers right, but given that I was a history teacher for 30-odd years, I'd be expected to. I do have a copy of that booklet, and it is ludicrous. It was widely ridiculed at the time, but as I understand it, you have no control over that. That is a statutory thing at UK level. Would that be correct?
We don't actually get involved in any of the testing parts, so that's all conducted by the Home Office. So we get a notification that the person has completed all of those tests, have achieved all of those things, and they then come to us for their ceremony, where they make the oath of allegiance and are presented with their nationality certificate. So we're right at the end of that procedure.
Yeah, I think, Councillor Strong, my point is exactly to Jennifer's point that we don't get involved in it, but that's how people in Home Offices or in other Whitehall offices, and I've worked there, I know how a lot of them work, they do try and do a good job, but that doesn't mean that they're doing the right job. And it seems to me that unless local authorities give some feedback, if I'm in a minority of one here in suggesting that these questions are fairly ludicrous to be asking people who wish to become British citizens, perhaps we should get involved by giving feedback to the Home Office and saying that we'd very much like to suggest that some of these questions, Councillor Strong might not get right in the future if they're not based on history. But anyway, it seems to me more than just a small point for people who are looking, who want to become new British citizens, which we hugely welcome. We don't want to put absurd barriers in their path that many of us would trip over ourselves. But yeah, so Councillor Strong, and then we'll move on.
Whose job would it be to provide the feedback? I suspect it's not the registration people. I would think it'd be the council as a whole. Yeah,
I think you're right.
Perhaps we can forward that to appropriate
I think you're right. It would help if there is any considered view from within the service rather than a view that we might ourselves think. And without turning this into an enormous issue, it does seem to me a very valid issue. And colleagues on the committee, if you have a different view, do let me know. If not, then I think that's something that I would want to be seeing if we could push for within the council, just to make input into the Home Office and say, for goodness sake, 2023, and we're asking who built the Tower of London and who was executed in 1649. I suspect it was Councillor Strong who wrote some of those questions. But okay, we'll move on.
I'll bring my book to the next meeting and test several of you.
There you go, thank you. We'll move on, if we may, to to the next item. I'm looking for, sorry, I should say that we accept that report, and thank you to David and to Jennifer for your time spent today, and I know you'll feed back to your colleagues the messages from all the committee members of thank you and praise for their efforts in that time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We'll certainly feed back to the teams. Thank you.
Appreciate that. So we will move on to the strategic procurement review. I'm looking for us to see if we can bring this in at 12 o'clock, if that's at all possible, just to see if we can land in that time frame. And thank you again. I notice also Kath Fallon has joined us, and thank you, Kath, for that. It's good to see you here. And also to Steve Robinson, who's joined us. And again, thank you for that. So we will move on to that report. We work on the assumption that committee members have read the report, and therefore we're looking for any specific points that you wish to highlight from the report, Kath and Steve. And we would then take some questions, and if you're able to be as brief as you can be in your responses, that will be helpful from the point of view of managing time. Thank you again. So over to Kath, would you wish to start, or to Steve?
Really just to invite Steve just to walk us through his report, really. I know the addition to the report has been the survey data. There's been a survey just undertaken with our managers within the authority to see how they felt the service was going, any sort of improvements they felt were needed, and we're actually going to use that data to inform future training programmes. But I'll leave this with Steve for now to run us through. Thank you, Steve.
Sorry, Kath, that was really my point. I really would appreciate if you don't walk us through the report, because we have read the report. What we're looking for is any key points that you wish to highlight from the report, and then it will be open to questions. So this will be a brief set of highlight points. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for the clarification. Steve will highlight the points. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, just a couple of points really, I guess. I suppose just highlighting the fact, a key piece of work that we've been very much focused on is development of the socially responsible procurement strategy, which you will already have has already been through this scrutiny group already for comments, which have been gratefully accepted, and we've looked to incorporate that. And one of the things which was recommended from here as well is around developing the delivery plan to a more comprehensive level, which we've done. It was due to go to Cabinet tomorrow, but it's now been pushed back to the 1st of March. So obviously that's going to be a key document in terms of the kind of short, medium, long-term development of procurement across the authority, which obviously then looks to ensure that we are focused around delivery around a number of key priorities, for example, around climate change, support for local business, fair work, and delivering additional social value and benefits for individuals and communities. Just a point worth mentioning, big challenge for us, and it's not just a challenge for us, but particularly across local government, across the UK really, recruitment and retention. Typically what we're finding is people can get £15,000 to £20,000 a year more in other public sector areas, health, particularly, and then private sector. Obviously, the shift in move to more hybrid working, as we call it, has obviously meant that opportunities that previously wouldn't have been available to staff living in Wales now are. So we have had some challenges there, but I'm pleased because we've invested over the last 7 years in our student placement programme. I think it puts us in a far better position than most, and so we've just gone through a successful recruitment exercise over the last couple of months, but obviously it's caused some disruption for us. But what we've also done is use that as an opportunity to restructure the procurement team, really to take into account some of the kind of lessons learned we've already had in terms of the operation of the service, because obviously it's a kind of new way of working for all of us. It means we've had to prioritise some of the contract delivery, and we've obviously got some of the numbers there, but I think we've been able to make some good progress against a number of the key priorities. That activity has highlighted some areas which I guess, again, we're we've been on a journey in over 10 years in Cardiff in terms of what we've been trying to do around procurement. I mean, what we're finding is there are certain areas that, things like health and safety, Welsh language, data protection, areas that we, around managing risk that we felt there's a need to strengthen. And again, those things have emerged through the delivery, and they're obviously forming now part of our programme for improvement. As Kath said, we have recently undertaken a survey both of officers across Monmouthshire, but also of our team, the procurement team within Cardiff as well, really to kind of focus on, I guess, learning what's working well, what's not working so well, and really kind of using that to kind of help inform the way in which we develop the service. And some of the comments there are shown in Appendix A. And obviously, I won't go through the table, but what the table 1 is that we've got there just kind of highlights some of the areas that we referenced you to when we came and gave a previous update to this scrutiny, and some of the key areas we've been focused on. So communication, staff education, training, obviously development of the strategy, the kind of review and work we're doing in terms of progressing things like around the governance arrangements and the systems, what we've done around spend analysis and developing the contract register, and then obviously the contract pipeline and operational support. So that's kind of been the kind of focus of the work we've been doing.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Just to ensure we have time for questions, Councillor Bond.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you very much, Steve. Good overview, good report. I can see that there's lots of actions relating to the feedback you've received, and there's some positive, as you say, for the interaction with Cardiff. I wonder, so number 7, I think question 7 and question 8, particularly around expectations for people and perhaps more softer behavioural understanding where people fit and the part each person plays in delivering what the council needs for the people in Monmouthshire is perhaps something that we really need to, or you've identified is a gap. And I wonder which of those actions or whether those actions will go far enough, and so it's a culture behavioural interactions, how, not the what, because you've got lots of what's there, maybe the how, and the how we bring people with us. Sorry, you bring people for our benefit and the people in Monmouthshire. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, when we talk about enablers, there's things like people, training, processes, systems, but culture is the key, one of the key enablers really to this. I suppose, I mean, I don't think there's a kind of silver bullet, one thing that's going to kind of resolve that. We actually had a good catch up with Abby from the communications team within Monmouthshire yesterday about this kind of very point, because there's a couple of things we're doing. One is the strategy itself. Yeah. So we obviously, part of the purpose of the strategy is to set a direction of travel, but also to kind of find a way of communicating, articulating what the priorities for the authority are and how we go about delivery of those. And key is the alignment there to not just the national policy and legislation, which obviously we need to be aware of, but also to the priorities within Monmouthshire. And obviously the key focus for that obviously is your community and corporate plans. So for us, I mean, we've got a little bit, obviously we're conscious that the community corporate plan is going, I think it's cabinet tomorrow. So we will be, on the outcome of that, we've already spoken with Kath, we'll be going through that again, just to make sure we've got a really strong alignment, which we think we already have. There's a couple of areas we might be able to tighten up on. But I think what I spoke to Abby about yesterday was really about how we, when we look to touch wood, the strategy gets approved by cabinet in March, then it's about how we start to communicate some of those broader messages out across the team. The other thing that we're doing as well, and to be honest, we're always learning. Yeah, we've made the point when we've come into this partnership that we don't come with all the answers. We're learning ourselves. And one of the things that we've recognised, and this isn't just for the work we're doing in Monmouthshire, but it's for Cardiff as well, is sometimes the way in which we try and inform, educate officers across the council, particularly those who are where it's an occasional part of their role, which can be the case for many people, is we could do that better. So actually what we're doing at the moment, again, I talked through this with Abby yesterday, is we're developing a kind of buying responsibly kind of education learning program, which is supported with good online material. But really the key about that is trying to get key messages across in as simple a way as we can, and that's where I've asked Abby and the comms team to support us as a critical friend with that, because sometimes we can be too technical, and actually what we need to do is sometimes simplify our messages, you know. But also about making sure that rather than giving people a 60-page manual on this is how you do it, it's about how we better use some of the technology available to us through things like SharePoint as a way of being able to break down the information that people need into more bite-sized pieces in a way that's much easier to follow. So those are all pieces of work which are currently in train. And the way we're dealing with the buying responsibly is we're building the, if you like, the proof of concept we're doing within Cardiff, with a view then that we would then look to roll that out then across the other authorities that we work with.
Thank you, Steve.
Not all online, so maybe looking at some RACI charts and making it and interacting more with individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to say as well that we yesterday, my guys delivered training to 40 officers across Monmouthshire around introduction to procurement, the contract procedure rules, etc. So, yeah, I mean, we don't. The education training bit is a combination of different approaches that we'd be looking to take.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Pavia.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The report is interesting. I mean, as the former chair of the Economy and Development Select, that was sort of pushing officers really to get a grip on our procurement practices. I mean, in terms of trying to understand the initial impact, I suppose, of the partnership with Atrabian, I would have liked a little bit more, being brutally honest. Now, that might be a situation in terms of it's taken a greater amount of time to get to where we are, you know, obviously pandemic, but in terms of, you know, it sounds like what you're saying, Steve, you know, that you've had a restructure in Cardiff, you know, that's obviously impacted on the, you know, the service you're providing us and others, and also, you know, we've had a change of administration, and you know that's probably taken a little bit of the grease out of the wheel in terms of having the administration understand what its priorities are, align it with corporate plan, etc. But I know, you know, when we had a number of different meetings in the previous administration on the committee, you know, and trying to understand our procurement data baseline, you know, systems weren't talking to one another. We didn't have that baseline. But I mean, you know, I would like to know, you know, where are teams now? What are they looking like in terms of their understanding and capability? I know, again, sort of harping back to the previous committee, but obviously procurement savings was a big issue for the administration then. You know, it would be good to know. You've obviously put some pipeline figures there, but in terms of procurement savings, how we are doing that, but also look at the social value of our procurement spend as well. How much is staying within Monmouthshire? How much is staying within the region? You know, the survey data is interesting, but without the survey methodology and understanding, you know, numbers, it's a little bit meaningless to a degree. You know, there's obviously a lot of work that needs to be done still in terms of upskilling staff members. I can see that, but it would be good to see this come back again with a little bit more meat on the bones, as it were.
Councillor Pavey.
Hope that's not too negative.
Councillor Pavey, thanks for that. And could I just add a question I was going to put to, because I think it's in exactly the same area as Councillor Pavia, Steve, which is just, you know, after this is about 18 months on from August 21, or getting on for 18 months, are we able to identify in hard cash terms or in improved value terms what the joint working is delivering. Last time we looked at that, we completely accepted it was probably a little too early. But is there anything we can say about that, just to add to Councillor Pavia's point, in hard terms about, well, you know, if somebody asks the question, what have we got out of the joint working, you know, what that answer might be?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're right. I mean, I guess what we've been trying to do is build things up from the ground up, you know, because my experience of, for example, the way we've run procurement in Cardiff, you've got to get the basics right, yeah, and everything builds on that, and the value starts to come from that. So I think there's a lot of practice areas that we felt there's need to strengthen, and that, if I'm honest, that's probably been our primary focus, is to get the basics right. I mean, if you take social value as an example, I mean, one of the things we have looked to do through the work we've done already is to kind of baseline the current position around, for example, spend that's kept within Monmouthshire, within the local area. We have in our strategy then a number of practical, tangible, pragmatic steps that we want to look to take to kind of improve and strengthen that, which is kind of looking at changes to our working practice, looking at working with other partners in terms of what they can do. And so I think what we've looked to try and do with the strategy is to kind of start to give ourselves a bit of an idea of kind of where our baseline position is. And then really for us to be able, I mean, there's no silver bullets with a lot of this. It's taking a large number of connected activities and steps to try and progress on a journey. Yeah, and this was never going to happen overnight to enable us to get to a position where we're starting to see that value come through. I mean, to be honest, we've not, you know, I mean, there are obviously comments coming through there about savings. I think part of the challenge with savings is the market conditions that we are facing at the moment. So again, I guess when you would be looking at savings, in many cases, it may be cost avoidance you'd be looking at rather than something which is a reduction in cost. I think also, though, there are a lot of practices that there are potential requirements that we would expect to be in tenders in terms of provisions which are not there, which, you know, I mean, what value do you put on making sure you've got good risk management, health and safety, making sure we're complying with our Welsh language standards requirements, making sure we're managing any data protection issues. So I think when we talk about value, for us, it's quite a broad agenda for us.
Steve, I absolutely, I'm just conscious of time. I absolutely accept that those points are well made and reasonably made. However, much of what you've just said is valuable information for councillors and residents alone. It's not purely, as you've rightly said, hard cash savings, additional service gain from expenditure. It might be cost avoidance. It might be the improvement in our ability to meet standards. Those things are entirely valid. But I think what we're saying, and definitely I'll be looking for in future reports, is that you identify those things as some of the benefits accrued to date of the joint working. Yep. You know, completely get that it's not all about, you know, pounds and pence in one column and nothing else in any other column. There is some quantitative, and even the cost avoidance could be potentially quantified. But qualitative can be extremely important as well, and we do place a value on that. It's just that area, I think, needs to be hardened up in the report, but thank you. Okay, I thank you for the report overall and for the responses, which have been very helpful in terms of the discussion. Committee members, colleagues, I move the report and looking for you to accept the report. I see that you do. So Steve and Kath, thank you for your time this morning. Much appreciated, and also for the report itself and the work that goes into it. And behind the scenes, I've no doubt there is a huge amount that you're not even touching on here. So next time round, I think what we're really looking for is just to expose some of the gains around that. And in the meantime, thank you very much indeed for joining the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks again. So, colleagues, we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is just to quickly look at the forward work programme, and just to mention that I'm sure you're aware of, next week on the 25th, we've got an additional meeting, which is to look at budget mandates. What could be simpler than that? And Councillor Bond.
Are you on Agenda 7? Sorry, Chair. Are you on Agenda 7? Item 7 now.
Yes, I am.
Just a question on that then, please. Just wonder what the progress is against those actions, those 3 actions there. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll come to that one in a second, but just trying to make sure that, and thank you, Councillor Bond, just trying to make sure that everyone has in their diary the 25th of January, which is the budget mandates which relate to our remit, and our role in this will be important. So that will be a fairly unique meeting at this time of the year, and hopefully we won't need any more of them as we move forward. And also just to mention that the 23rd of February meeting, we're looking for scheduling reasons to move that to the 27th or 28th, and Hazel and Robert will confirm that. So that's the 23rd Feb moving to the 27th, so moving from the Thursday to the following Monday or Tuesday, and we'll confirm just which of those fits. But coming to Councillor Bond's question, Hazel, did you want to follow up on the 3 questions that, or the 3 points that were actioned?
We've got 3 actions there, Chair, which we've taken away, and we've got provisional responses for 2 of them, but the 3rd one we're awaiting. So when we've got the 3 responses, we'll send them out together. I think it is worthwhile noting that there's a relatively short amount of time, if you take out Christmas and New Year, since you last met, which was on the 15th of December. It's sort of 4 working weeks, but if you take out Christmas, it's 3. So we're just chasing up that final response. We've got the 2, and we'll send them out to you as soon as we've got those. Thanks.
Yeah, it's just to add to Hazel's point. I think we started the year with a calendar plan for 4 meetings during the year. We will have had 6 by the end of January, so I'm certainly putting you to the grindstone, and thank you for your commitment to it. But the work that we do is really important. So it's hopefully very much about improving the way that we operate as a council. Thanks, Hazel. And there were a couple of actions coming out today as well. We're looking for the reports to include, in terms of public protection, the next report to include a review of the lessons learned and specific actions that we've taken that we might wish to reflect on and plan for differently coming through that, which would be in the report scheduled for May or June. Also looking for, as a more general aspect, improvements in service that the service managers, officers would be keen to develop. So not only reflecting on performance in the terms that they have, but actually what areas do they know of that we'd like to do better. And that would clearly be subject to different aspects. And also on the procurement strategy, to look to for them to be able to identify very specific benefits arising in the period of review from the joint working, and I'm sure Steve enumerated quite a few of those. Thank you, Hazel. Moving on to, was there anything else, Hazel, on that?
Sorry, could I just come in?
Sure, Councillor Chandler, yes.
Yeah, just on the future work programme, because underneath the timetable, we've got items for future inclusion, and just sit there from time to time. I just wondered whether we could get a sense of the process by which those are being readied to be brought before the committee. Because I think they're ones that we've identified either because they're persistently high risks or because we just think they're strategically important for our oversight. And rather than just have them on the as a recurrent sort of footnote on the forward work plan, it would be nice to see a sort of what is the sense of either likely timescale and what is the process by which officers are preparing the necessary reports for us to consider.
Thanks, Councillor Chandler, and I'll ask Hazel just to come in on this in a second. A lot of this does work to the broader agenda of the administration and also of the officers in terms of when reports, first of all, need to be ready and need to be scrutinised, and also when we as a committee believe we should be looking at them. So, for example, Hazel and I have had a discussion earlier about the corporate and community plan, which I talked about with the leader. I'm keen that we bring that onto our committee, and that will be scheduling for the 27th or 28th of February. But Hazel, over to you just on those other areas that are on the items for future inclusion.
Yes, there was one thing that the chair has possibly mentioned to you for the meeting that might change a date, the 23rd of February, which we're thinking might be the 27th. We've had a request from officers to bring a report to you on discretionary tax premium for empty homes and second properties. So that would pretty much, I think, it's a big debate, take up your meeting on the 23rd of February, but you might also want to schedule a second item the chair's raised, which is the corporate plan for that. But your remaining meetings there, we need to schedule in the items that you've raised, but we're looking for you as a committee to give us some sense of direction on which ones you'd like to prioritise soonest. And then obviously out of today, some of them the chair's mentioned would come back early summer, but I know that you were thinking of bringing the strategic risk register back as well, and that would involve us looking at which risks you wanted to scrutinise and then making sure that we had the relevant cabinet members present. So I'm looking for ideas from the committee as to which order you'd like to put those items in. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Hazel. And it's just thinking about that, Councillor Chandler, perhaps what we should do, we could do this ahead of the meeting on the 25th of January, or we could do this in the February meeting. We could start instead of starting the pre-meeting at 9:30, we could start at 9. We could spend half an hour just discussing as a committee any priority areas that you think you'd like us to bring forward, or at least see what timing. To take your point, Councillor Chandler, it's not only about having them on, for example, the next meeting, but knowing when they might be coming up during the course of the calendar year. So perhaps we could build in that extra half hour prior to pre-meet for that purpose, Hazel, and we could do that. The budget meeting is a difficult one because it's very much a focus on the budget, but it might be the next meeting that we do that.
I think practically, Chair, it might be better for the subsequent meeting, and also for members to note, with the budget being a special meeting, we don't place the work programme and minutes and that sort of other sort of business onto that meeting. It will be solely scrutiny of the budget proposals. But if you would like to suggest an earlier pre-meeting for that purpose on the budget meeting, if you want to have more time, because half an hour is not very long, we can have an earlier pre-meeting. That's something we can organise as a committee, so I'll take your views on that.
Yeah, but just very specifically to Councillor Chandler's suggestion that we well, I'm just taking it from there that maybe we spend some specific time considering the future items, that you have that opportunity to have it as a discussion. You always have the opportunity, and the contacts have been made with me and with Hazel by various members of the committee in the last few months. But yeah, why don't we take that one away and see if we can schedule that? I think it's a really well-made point, and thanks for raising it. Conscious of time, but also looking at the forward plan for the Council and Cabinet. You will all be aware of, in addition to the 9th March, final budget sign-off plan, which needs to be signed off for a legal budget within a few days of that. That there will be an additional full Council budget meeting now scheduled for the 2nd of March. And I'm sure you've got that in your diaries, but that's now in the forward plan. And finally, to the minutes of the previous meeting, just to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, which we held on the 15th of December. It seems a very long time ago now, doesn't it? But it's actually only not even a month ago. But yeah, 15th of December, I proposed the minutes and move those. So do you second the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you. And no additions or changes. So with that in mind, look forward to seeing you all on the 25th. Right, Hazel, what's he looking at here? Okay, the calendar of the meetings is due to be agreed. Hazel's just given me a note on at the Thursday's Council, and they have selected Thursdays, so we'll have a look at that. But anyway, we'll follow through from the Thursday Council meeting. I'm sure we'll see you all there. And in any case, thanks for your contributions this morning, much appreciated, and see you again, no doubt on Thursday, but also on the 25th. And stay well, stay cool, and we'll see you then. Bye now.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you. Bye-bye.